My name is Emily Harper, and I pay half the mortgage on a house where I now sleep on the floor. My room, my only sanctuary, was handed over to my injured sister with a smile and zero discussion. But what they didn't know was this: I keep receipts, and soon they'll remember exactly who this house really belongs to. Before we dive in, where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let me take you into the living room of betrayal where it all began. It was supposed to be a normal Sunday, the kind where I could sip my coffee in peace before tackling the endless to-do list of adult life. But instead, I walked straight into a family ambush. My mother, Patricia, was in full hosting mode, sweater draped neatly across her shoulders, hands clasped like she was about to auction off a prize. "Jessica needs a real bed while she heals," she announced like it was some logistical update. Not a bombshell. Jessica, my younger sister, had slipped a disc last week lifting something she had no business touching. She cried about it for 2 days, and suddenly the world was tilting on its axis to accommodate her pain. "She'll need your room for now," Patricia continued, her voice sweetened with that performative concern she pulls out for church potlucks and neighborhood meetings. I blinked. "My room?" Patricia didn't flinch. She turned to Jessica, who was already eyeing the stairs. And then my father, who hadn't even looked up from his phone, muttered, "Just sleep on the floor for a bit, Em." Just sleep on the floor. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was surreal. My name is on the mortgage. I've been paying half since I moved back in after grad school. I do the meal planning, the grocery runs, I cover the water bill, and last winter I footed the repair for the busted furnace. But sure, let's just toss me to the floor like a throw pillow. "I live here," I said slowly, like maybe they'd forgotten. "My name's on the mortgage." Jessica, ever the actress, breezed past with a wink, dragging her rolling suitcase behind her like a debutante entering her honeymoon suite. "Thanks, sis," she chirped. "I'll take great care of it." I watched her disappear up the stairs, her socked feet not even hesitating at the threshold. My room, my bed, my sanctuary. I stood there stunned, while Patricia pulled out fresh sheets and started fluffing pillows like this had been the plan all along. Like I'd agreed to it. They didn't even ask. I felt the shift then. That tiny, cracking tremor in my chest that whispered, "This isn't your home anymore." "Where should I sleep?" I asked, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. Patricia barely looked up. "Well, the couch in the hallway's comfy enough. It's just temporary." That couch is a glorified bench. Narrow, drafty, and planted directly under a vent that hisses heat inconsistently through the night. I once joked that even the cat avoids it, but apparently it was good enough for me now. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just walked to the linen closet, grabbed the thinnest blanket I could find, and dragged it to the hallway like a ghost in a house that no longer recognized me. Laying down that first night, listening to Jessica's movie blaring from my TV in my room, I stared at the ceiling and wondered, when exactly did I become disposable? Weeks passed. I didn't fight them, not out loud. I simply stopped paying. No more automatic transfers to the joint mortgage account. No more picking up extra items at the grocery store just because. And definitely no more Wi-Fi upgrades on my card while Jessica streamed reality shows from my bed. I didn't announce it. I didn't warn them. I just watched. Watched as the sink filled with takeout containers, pad thai one night, pizza the next, shawarma after that. Watched as Amazon packages stacked up by the front door, none of them addressed to me. "Emily, we're ordering Thai again," Patricia called from the kitchen one night like I should be grateful for the invitation. No mention of splitting the bill. I tilted my head from the couch-turned sleeping bag. "Not hungry," I replied. Not true. I was starving. But not just for food. I was starving for acknowledgement. For someone to notice that the household wasn't running quite the same. That the woman who quietly paid the power bill each month and bought the extra toilet paper before anyone asked was suddenly still. But the silence around me thickened. Not concerned silence, convenient silence. The kind you wrap around someone when you don't want to deal with the discomfort of their needs. Or worse, their absence. Jessica had made herself cozy in my room. My bedspread replaced with a floral monstrosity she claimed brightened the energy. Her mug, one of mine, of course, sat on my nightstand, and my framed photos were nowhere to be found. In their place was a mini humidifier and a lavender sleep mist. Sometimes I'd catch the flicker of my own lamp under the door, still on at midnight, casting shadows on the hallway walls. I wondered if she even thought about me when she turned it on, or if I'd become so invisible that she now believed the space had always been hers. Once I overheard her on the phone with a friend. "Yeah, it's basically like my room now. Honestly, Emily's never around anyway." That part stung, not because it was true, but because I'd made it easy to believe. I'd always been the background fixture, the reliable one, the steady pulse of the household. You don't notice the heartbeat until it stops. Now I was watching them build their lives atop my foundation, all while treating me like dust under the floorboards. Jessica moaned loudly one afternoon from behind my door. Your Wi-Fi is so slow again." She emerged with a blanket draped over her shoulders like a cape. "Can we upgrade it to the premium plan this month? I'll Venmo you later." I smiled tightly. "I'm not covering extras anymore." She blinked. "Wait, are you mad or something?" "No," I said, stacking dishes from the counter. "Just reprioritizing." Patricia chimed in from the dining room without looking up from her Sudoku. "Well, it's not like we're asking for much, Emily. You still live here. It's not fair to expect Jessica to rough it while she's healing." I scrubbed at a plate so hard it nearly cracked. "I sleep in a hallway." No response. Just the sound of Jessica turning up the volume on my TV. There's a word for this feeling, when you walk through your own home and nothing touches you. Not the walls, not the voices, not even the light filtering through the window. It's not quite rage, it's erosion, a slow dissolve of self. Every takeout container, every passed-over utility, every decision made without me was another drop of acid on my identity. But I wasn't gone. Not yet. I kept a journal now tucked into the lining of my bag. I tracked dates, purchases, comments. Like a silent accountant watching her business be mismanaged into the ground. They thought I was sulking. But I was gathering, watching. Not for revenge, not yet, but for clarity. Because if I didn't understand how deep their entitlement ran, I'd never know just how far I needed to go to reclaim what was mine. That night, Jessica posted a photo to her social feed. Her sprawled across my bed, captioned "Recovery Queen Crown" with a tray of sushi and an iced latte perched beside her. I stared at the image like it was a mugshot. It wasn't just my room they'd taken. It was the assumption that I wouldn't fight back. It started with curtains. Thin, pastel ones printed with roses, cheap, synthetic, the kind you'd find in a clearance bin at a big box store. I was passing the bedroom door, my bedroom, when I saw her, Jessica, on a chair, thumbtacking them in place like a teenager decorating a dorm. "Oh my God," she squealed to herself. "It finally feels like mine." Mine. She didn't even whisper it, didn't lower her voice out of guilt or courtesy. She said it like it had always been true, like I'd just been a placeholder, a body warming a space she now saw as her own. I paused in the hallway, clutching a cup of tea I'd forgotten to sip. My hand trembled slightly. Not from rage, not yet. Just that quiet, rattling shock when something inside you breaks but you're not sure which part. From behind her, Patricia appeared, arms crossed, smiling as if Jessica had just unveiled a work of art. "Honestly," she said with a soft giggle, "Em was never really home much anyway." The words hit harder than they had any right to. I stood still, half a step away from my own door as laughter bloomed inside it. They didn't even know I was there. Maybe they wouldn't have cared. It was such a casual betrayal wrapped in giggles and linen. I wanted to shout, to ask her what she meant by never really home. Because I'd been here, through every drafty winter and every leaky summer. I was the one who stayed when Dad's job got cut and the bills piled up. I was the one who took a lower-paying remote job just to be close enough to help. But none of that made me visible. The door creaked slightly under Jessica's open window. A breeze caught the edge of the new curtain and fluttered it outward, mockingly soft, traitorous in its prettiness. I didn't move. I couldn't. It was as if my feet had sunk into the floorboards. They were redecorating me out of my own life. That afternoon, I found one of my books, The Power of Quiet, on a donate pile in the garage. My sweater, a pale blue one I'd bought during a hard winter, draped over a box labeled storage. Not even Emily's. I stood in front of the boxes and blinked down at them like an archaeologist digging through the ruins of a life that wasn't ancient yet. The betrayal wasn't loud. That was the worst part. It wasn't a slammed door or an explosive argument. It was slow, clinical, practiced. They were erasing me with a smile. I didn't argue. I didn't reclaim the book or the sweater. Instead, I went to my car, pulled out an old canvas bag, and started quietly collecting the things that mattered, the ones they hadn't touched yet. My passport, my pay stubs, a small notebook of passwords, and a USB drive with everything I'd ever backed up. I wasn't sure what I was doing yet, but I knew I was done pretending this was home. That night, I stood at the end of the hallway, watching the flicker of light spill from beneath my old door. Jessica was playing music, loud, poppy, oblivious. And from the kitchen, Patricia's laughter, sharp and indulgent, joined in harmony like a chorus in a play I was no longer cast in. I felt like a ghost, an echo with a heartbeat. Was I really that easy to replace? I went back to the couch, unrolled the blanket, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The vent above me hissed heat in uneven puffs. My back ached from sleeping on a surface not meant for humans. And yet somehow that ache grounded me. It was real, unlike everything else here. Tomorrow, I decided something would change. Not with a scream, not with a fight, but with quiet precision. They didn't hear the click when I removed my name from the utility accounts. There wasn't a dramatic announcement, no slamming of drawers or passive-aggressive monologue. Just the soft tapping of keys as I logged into websites one by one and slowly began severing ties to this house. The house I used to love. Electric, water, internet, gas. I clicked cancel, remove user, change password, and watched each thread of responsibility unravel from my hands. My name faded from their safety net like fog from a mirror. I didn't even blink. Then I transferred my savings. Every cent, years of careful budgeting and side gigs, moved out of the joint account my father insisted on setting up for easier mortgage coordination. I let it sit there for months, watching how they casually dipped into it for groceries, Jessica's new mattress topper, and a home wellness diffuser Patricia said was essential for recovery. Now the account balance was 73 cents. I left it open, just enough to keep them guessing. Then I unplugged the Wi-Fi. I didn't announce it. Just pulled the cord from the back of the router, tucked it into my bag, and walked away. That night, I sat at the kitchen table sipping tea from a chipped mug while Jessica stomped down the stairs like she'd been personally wronged by the universe. She barked, one hand clutching her phone, the other holding the half-eaten sleeve of cookies I bought last week. The internet cut out in the middle of my show. She looked at me like I'd short-circuited her nervous system. I didn't look up from my tea. Must be an outage. Jessica blinked, waiting, then narrowed her eyes. Did you pay the bill? I gave her a neutral shrug. I figured you'd handle it this month, since you're making the most use of it. She scoffed. Seriously, I'm recovering. You expect me to deal with billing stuff while I'm in pain. You seemed fine when you posted that dance challenge video yesterday, I said softly, finally locking eyes with her. Her cheeks flushed. Wow, are you seriously being petty about this? No, I'm being equitable, I replied. Patricia called from the living room. Jessica, just hotspot from your phone. Emily, we'll figure it out later. They didn't get it. They still thought this was a squabble over bandwidth, not the beginning of consequences. I spent that night reorganizing my laptop. Every file with sensitive information, banking records, tax forms, work contracts, moved into encrypted folders. I backed up everything to the cloud, then wiped my work desktop clean just in case someone got curious. I didn't trust them anymore. Not because they were malicious, but because they were entitled, and entitlement behaves like a slow leak. It doesn't care what it damages as long as the faucet stays on. In the early morning hours, I walked through the dark house like a stranger casing a place she used to own. My fingers brushed over the banister I'd helped stain, the creaky third step I'd always meant to fix, the chipped tile in the entryway I once patched with a YouTube tutorial and sheer will. All of it mine in some way, all of it. Stolen in plain sight. In the hallway, Jessica's door was ajar. My door. The floral curtains were drawn tight and my bookshelf was bare now. She had replaced my novels with scented candles and folded towels. A spa, a sanctum. I leaned against the wall, letting the silence wrap around me like armor. They couldn't feel the shift yet, but I could. It was in the way the hallway creaked differently under my feet, the way I no longer looked for their approval when I spoke, the way I had nothing left to give. They had erased me from this home. Now I would erase my presence from its foundation, and they'd finally feel what it meant to lose what they never bothered to see. It started with a sputter, the kind of choking sound pipes make when they're no longer fed. I was sitting at the kitchen table, swirling honey into my tea when I heard it, an uneven gurgle, then a clang, and then silence. The house held its breath. Then came the scream. "What the hell?" My father's voice, sharp and wet, bounced off the tiled bathroom walls like a ricochet. I heard the shower curtain pull violently, water sloshing, feet slipping. Doors flew open upstairs. "Emily," he barked mid-panic. "The water just cut off. Did you forget to pay the bill?" I didn't flinch, didn't rise from the table, didn't even pause my stirring. "No," I called up, calm as a lake. "I stopped paying 2 months ago." Silence. That kind of silence only truth brings, heavy, thick, impossible to argue with. "What do you mean you stopped?" he demanded, appearing moments later at the top of the stairs, towel barely clinging to his waist, steam rising behind him like some tragic Greek drama. I took a sip of my tea and met his gaze with total stillness. "I've been removed from every account that had my name on it. Utilities, internet, joint savings, all gone." "But why?" he asked, as if it were some unfathomable act of cruelty. I leaned back in my chair, watching him drip onto the floor I once scrubbed myself. "Because I no longer live here in any meaningful way. I sleep on a hallway couch while my sister redecorates my room with my money." Patricia appeared behind him, wrapped in a robe, already shaking her head. "Emily, you're overreacting. This is a family house." "No," I said gently, placing my mug down. "This is a house where I foot the bills, sleep like a guest, and listen to strangers giggle behind my closed door. That's not family, that's occupancy." Jessica burst out from the bedroom, my bedroom, her eyes wild, towel wrapped around her head like a turban. "The Wi-Fi's been down for days, now no hot water. What are we supposed to do?" "Figure it out," I replied. They stared at me like I had spoken in code, as if they couldn't possibly comprehend a world where Emily, the dependable, quiet Emily, had simply stopped absorbing the blows, stopped funding their comfort, stopped being convenient. Patricia took a cautious step forward. "But what about the furnace? It's going to get cold soon." I nodded. "That's true." Jessica narrowed her eyes. "You're being spiteful." "No," I said. "I'm being precise." The next morning, the furnace gave its last wheeze. It was just past dawn. A frost had crept over the windows, and a bite lingered in the air. I stayed wrapped in my robe, sipping coffee in the armchair I had silently reclaimed. The thermostat blinked a dull warning. The floorboards no longer held warmth. I watched as Patricia paced in slippers, rubbing her arms for heat, dialing customer service numbers she didn't recognize. Jessica was layered in sweaters, whining loudly, her phone data now maxed out from streaming on hotspot. My father, ever stubborn, kept asking, "Did you call the company? What's taking so long?" I could have told them why the furnace wasn't responding. Because the maintenance plan I paid for had expired. Because the card on file was mine. Because when you erase someone from a home, you don't get to keep their benefits. Instead, I simply stood, rinsed my mug, and walked past them without a word. Not in anger, not in triumph, just in silence. The kind of silence that finally demands attention. And for the first time since they gave my room away, I felt seen not through their eyes, but through my own. The house had turned sour. Cold drafts slid beneath the door frames. Dishes sat unwashed in the sink, and Jessica's floral curtains drooped without pride, as if they too had finally realized they didn't belong here. Then came the stomping. Jessica, hunched slightly, hand on her lower back, burst into the living room like a melodramatic ghost. She wore 3 layers of fleece, her hair a messy bun of frustration, and her face twisted in self-pity. "You're ruining my recovery," she shrieked, as though her slipped disc had turned into a Shakespearean tragedy. I didn't flinch. I was folding laundry on the arm of the hallway couch, my new dresser. "How could you be so cruel?" she demanded, limping dramatically across the room. No heat, no hot water. Do you even care that I'm in pain? I looked up and calmly laid a folded towel down. Do you care that I've been sleeping under an air vent for 6 weeks while you used my heating pad in my bed? Her mouth opened, then closed, but I wasn't done. Do you care that every meal you've ordered came from a kitchen I helped fund, or that every shower you've taken until yesterday was powered by my paycheck? Her face twisted. This is about money. No, I said. It's about dignity. Just then our father entered, holding his phone like a prop in some one-man morality play. He looked tired, like the kind of tired that comes not from hardship, but from inconvenience. Emily, he said with a disappointed shake of the head. What kind of daughter does this to her family? I smiled, but it wasn't warm. The kind who sleeps on the floor while you redecorate her room with her own money. He bristled. You're exaggerating. It was temporary. Jessica needed support. And I didn't, I asked softly. When I paid for furnace repairs last winter, where was my support? When I covered groceries for 6 months during your job break, did anyone say thank you? He frowned but said nothing. Jessica groaned and collapsed into the recliner with theatrical flair. I swear you act like you're some kind of victim. I laughed, short and sharp. I'm not acting, I'm responding. Patricia finally arrived, holding a heating pad like it was a peace offering. Can we all just calm down? This is not how families behave. Funny, I said. I've been thinking the same thing for months. Jessica sat upright. I'm injured. You're punishing me while I'm physically compromised. I tilted my head. And when I was emotionally compromised, when I lost my job and still paid your share of the mortgage to keep the lights on, what were you doing? Binging shows in my bed and calling it self-care. Patricia's voice tightened. You've made your point. Have I? I stood, folding the last towel. Because no one seemed to notice the silence I gave you before. Not when I stopped paying, not when I moved to the couch, not when I unplugged the router. But now that it's cold and dry and inconvenient, you want me to be the generous daughter again. Jessica was already halfway to tears, her pain suddenly emotional. You're heartless. No, I said. I'm finally heart-protected. My father rubbed his temples. This is extreme. It's not too late to make this right. Right for who? I asked. The ones who got warmth, Wi-Fi, and silence on my dime, or the woman you pushed to the hallway so you could pretend everything was normal? No one answered. Jessica slumped, defeated. My father looked out the window as if answers might fall from the sky. Patricia gripped her mug too tightly. I took a breath, a long, grounded breath. I'm not cruel, I said, voice steady. I'm just done carrying weight no one sees. And with that, I walked back down the hallway, past the thermostat now blinking blankly, past the bills tacked to the fridge, and back to the couch that had become my battleground. I didn't need heat to feel fire anymore. I didn't know where else to go, so I drove. No music, no destination. Just me and the sound of tires on wet pavement, rolling through late autumn drizzle. The inside of my car felt like the only safe space I had left. Heated seats humming faintly, familiar crumbs in the cup holder, the silence of no one demanding anything from me. Somewhere near the edge of town, I found myself parked in front of Java Bloom, the cafe I usually dashed into before work, always in a rush, always juggling. This time I just sat, until I saw Lisa through the window. Lisa, my coworker and sometimes lunch buddy, had the kind of warmth that didn't ask questions. She spotted me before I could look away, waved, and stepped out without hesitation. Emily? Her eyes scanned my face. You okay? The answer floated in the space between us. My puffy eyes, damp coat, and clenched jaw told the story before I said a word. Come inside, she said, gently touching my arm. You look like you need something warm that isn't sarcasm or sympathy. I followed her in. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and safety. Lisa ordered me chamomile before I could protest and steered us to a quiet corner near the window. We sat in silence for a while, just breathing. Then I broke, told her everything. Not the polite version, not the my sister's staying with us temporarily lie I'd been offering for months. The real story, the couch, the cold, the curtains, the way their laughter felt like a knife. Lisa didn't interrupt, didn't gasp or tilt her head like I was being too dramatic. She just listened, fully, like someone who'd known the taste of erasure before. When I finished, I felt hollow but lighter, Like finally naming it all had scooped out the rot. Lisa stirred her tea slowly. "You know what I hear," she said. "Not cruelty, not revenge, just boundaries, long overdue ones." I stared at her, unsure whether to cry again or just hug her. "You're not selfish, Emily, you're exhausted," she continued. "And no one sees how hard you've worked to make it livable for them." I laughed bitterly. "Livable? That's generous." Lisa leaned forward. "Listen, I have a guest room, small but quiet, and it is something revolutionary." I blinked. "What's that?" she smiled. "A door that locks." My laugh escaped before I could stop it, ugly and cracked but real. "I mean it," she said, setting her mug down. "You need space, actual space. You can stay as long as you need. I live alone. I'll even let you control the thermostat." A tear slid down my cheek before I even noticed. That night, I arrived with a single overnight bag and a heart full of everything I hadn't let myself feel in weeks. Lisa showed me the room, modest but soft. A twin bed dressed in clean linen, a small lamp on the nightstand, a folded blanket at the foot like a quiet welcome. There were no floral curtains, no old family photos I didn't belong in, no one asking me to pay for things they didn't appreciate, just stillness, and the soft click of a door that closed. As I dropped my bag onto the floor, something inside me exhaled, fully, for the first time in months. Later, Lisa knocked gently and handed me a mug of mint tea. "You're not wrong for wanting peace," she said. "And you're definitely not wrong for needing a lock." We clinked mugs like it was a toast to sanity. And when I curled up in bed that night, beneath a blanket I hadn't bought, in a room I didn't have to defend, I slept like someone who finally remembered she mattered. It arrived on a Tuesday. A thin, white envelope with the kind of stern lettering no one wants to see. Mortgage lender. Final notice. Bold red stamp across the front. Patricia found it wedged between a catalog and a pizza coupon on the kitchen counter. By the time she read it, her voice was already climbing. "What is this?" Jessica looked up from the couch, blanket cocooned around her like royalty, snacks scattered like offerings at her feet. Patricia stormed into the living room, waving the envelope like it was a declaration of war. "Final notice," she yelled. "We're behind on the mortgage." Jessica groaned, adjusting her neck pillow. "That's not possible. Em was paying that, wasn't she?" The silence that followed cracked something wide open. Patricia stared at her. "She was." Jessica sat up slowly as if the couch had turned cold. "Wait, since when?" They didn't know. Of course they didn't, because it was never their job to know. I got the text that evening. From my father, surprisingly brief. "Mortgage notice came today. Please call. We need to fix this. Urgently." Then one from Patricia, "How could you let it get this far, after everything we've done for you?" And finally from Jessica, "OMGM. Are you trying to make us homeless? You could have just said something. As if I hadn't. As if months of subtle boundaries and sleeping under vents hadn't screamed I'm done. I didn't respond. Not immediately. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water from Lisa's fridge, sat on the couch, and stared out her window at the quiet street lined with sleepy porch lights and parked cars. This house, Lisa's house, was warm. Still, no one yelled. No one left wet towels on the floor, and every mug returned to the cabinet where it belonged. When I finally replied, I didn't apologize. I typed carefully. "You relied on me like I was invisible. Now you'll finally understand I was holding it all together. Send." No fluff, no apology, just truth. Patricia called within seconds. I declined. She called again. Then Jessica, then my father. I silenced my phone. Lisa walked into the room with a throw blanket and saw my face. "They found the cracks," she asked. "They found the hole," I replied. We sat in silence, the good kind. The kind that makes space for something new. "They'll guilt you," she said gently. "Scream, cry, play the victim, but you owe them nothing that costs your peace." I nodded, the truth of it sitting heavy but right. In that moment I realized something. I didn't feel triumphant. I wasn't basking in revenge. I wasn't glad they were scared. I just didn't feel sorry anymore. They weren't unraveling because I was cruel. They were unraveling because for the first time in years they had to stand on legs that had never held any weight. The weight had always been mine. That night I slept deeply. No noises. No guilt tapping on my shoulder. Just the quiet knowing that letting things fall apart might be the first step to building something stronger. Without them, without lies, without apologies for taking up space. I hadn't set foot near the house in over a week, and yet my name was still tethered to its fate, etched onto the mortgage, embedded in the deed, tied to every legal thread that kept it upright. So I decided to untangle it. Lisa slid a business card across the kitchen table one morning. "He's good," she said. Quiet, thorough, and allergic to excuses. His name was Mr. Carver, real estate attorney. Office in a converted craftsman house with bookshelves full of thick legal codes and a ficus tree that looked more confident than I felt. He didn't ask many pleasantries, just gestured to the chair across from him and said, "Tell me what happened." So I did. I told him about the shared mortgage, the unofficial agreement, the payments I'd made without fail for nearly 4 years. I showed him spreadsheets, bank statements, utility receipts, every dollar, every cent. He listened in silence, occasionally scribbling something in a small notepad. When I finally finished, he leaned back and adjusted his glasses. "You're lucky," he said. "The deed was drafted under a survivorship clause. It allows for ownership reallocation if one party can prove they were the sole financial contributor over a substantial period." I blinked. Meaning, he said slowly, if we file the right documentation and your co-owners have no formal record of consistent payment, you can legally reclaim the house. I stared at him. "Reclaim all of it," he nodded once. "They never contributed, right?" I reached into my folder and slid the final spreadsheet across the table. He studied it for only a moment before looking back up. "This is airtight." For the first time in months, I felt the floor beneath me steady. We filed everything that same week. Quietly, no announcements, no threats, no warnings. I signed a stack of forms so thick my wrist ached. At the end of it, he handed me a copy of the petition and said, "Once it's processed, they'll receive notice. You'll get the keys." "The keys?" I asked. He smiled. "You're not just a name on paper anymore, you're the owner." It didn't feel real until I left the office and sat in my car, fingers trembling slightly around the steering wheel. I had power now. Not the kind that flexes or gloats, but the kind that roots. That quietly reminds you were never crazy, you were never invisible, you were just generous, too generous. When I returned to Lisa's place, I found her in the backyard pulling weeds from her tiny garden. I handed her the file folder and said, "I did it." She didn't ask what, just hugged me tight and said, "You're going home." I nodded. Not for a reunion, just for reclamation. That night, I lay in her guest bed with the folder beside me, eyes tracing the lines of my own name in bold print, sole owner. No more splitting. No more asking. No more waiting for permission to be seen. I wasn't going back to be cruel. I was going back to reclaim the space they'd erased me from, not as a tenant, not as a daughter, as the woman who paid every bill, as the woman they underestimated. As the woman who was no longer asking for space, she was taking it. They were still there when the letter arrived. I wasn't home to see it land in the mailbox, but I imagined Patricia tearing it open with her usual blend of curiosity and assumption. Jessica likely read over her shoulder, phone in one hand, waiting to dismiss whatever it was. But this time, it wasn't a bill. It was a notice. Official. Legal. Non-negotiable. 30 days to vacate or challenge, backed by the full weight of a refiled deed and a notarized record of financial history they couldn't match. They had no grounds to contest it, not a single line item. They didn't speak to me after that, not directly. I returned to the house exactly 1 day after the deadline passed. The front yard looked smaller than I remembered, somehow lonelier. But the second I stepped onto the porch with my key, I felt something settle deep in my chest, like a spine realigning. They weren't inside. I found out why when I walked around back. There, pitched like some failed camping experiment, was a borrowed 2-person tent, sagging in the middle and weighed down with bricks. 2 sleeping bags, cheap ones. A cooler. A tangle of extension cords that led to a neighbor's outlet. Patricia sat outside in a folding chair, arms crossed, face hard with indignation. Jessica lay curled in the tent, earbuds in, pretending not to notice me. I said nothing. She didn't ask to come in. I didn't invite her. Instead, I walked through the front door, my door, and stepped back into the bones of a house that had once swallowed me whole. It felt different now. Not empty. Open. I didn't go straight to the bedroom. I went to the office, the the room that had once held Jessica's storage bins and Patricia's sewing machine that never worked. I opened the windows wide, let the light pour in, and started unpacking my books, each one back on the shelf like a returned soldier. I lit a candle, lavender and cedarwood, rolled out a soft rug, placed a pillow on the armchair I'd rescued from Lisa's place. Piece by piece, I built a sanctuary, not a bedroom, not a hiding place, a room for thinking, for breathing, for remembering who I was before I gave it all away. The neighborhood caught on quickly. You can't evict your own family without drawing eyes, especially in Connecticut's suburbs where gossip travels faster than the mail. By day 3, I noticed heads turning at mailboxes, garage doors pausing halfway open. By day 5, Mr. Palmer from next door leaned over the fence while trimming his hedges. He raised an eyebrow. "Is it true?" I didn't pretend not to understand. I just nodded. "I stopped being invisible." He gave a slow, impressed whistle. "Well, damn." Jessica left the tent every afternoon to charge her phone and retrieve takeout from delivery drivers who now hovered awkwardly near the sidewalk. Patricia sat outside most of the day, wrapped in a knit shawl like a dethroned queen waiting to be pardoned. But I never opened the door, never brought out blankets or offered excuses. They weren't exiled. They were simply experiencing life without the woman they'd erased. Inside, I baked for the first time in months. Chocolate chip muffins, like the kind I used to make before silence became my survival strategy. I played music, read my books. Sat in my chair with the door open, sunlight spilling across the floor. Neighbors waved from porches, some with a nod, some with full smiles that said more than words ever could. And the house finally started to sound like me again. It didn't echo anymore. It pulsed. Alive, warm, owned. Mine. 3 months passed, long enough for the grass to grow high around the patch where their tent once stood, long enough for the neighbors to stop asking what happened, long enough for me to breathe in my own space without flinching at every door creak or phantom voice. I'd painted the hallway, hung a mirror in the entryway, filled the empty frames on the living room shelf with new photographs, ones that only had me in them, smiling, reading, holding a latte at Lisa's cafe. Alone, yes, but never lonely. And then, on an early spring evening, just as the last blush of sunset folded into the trees, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door slowly, prepared for a delivery driver or a curious neighbor. But there they stood, Patricia and Jessica. Jessica held a paper bag, grease staining the corners, the scent of sesame and soy wafting toward me like some nostalgic bribe. Patricia wore a soft pink sweater I didn't recognize, her expression a carefully curated mix of maternal concern and veiled hope. "Emily," Patricia said, offering a tight smile, "we thought maybe we could talk." Jessica stepped forward, bag outstretched like a peace offering. "We brought your favorite, shrimp lo mein." It was absurd, really, that they thought noodles and small smiles could undo everything, that they imagined this door, my door, still opened the same way it used to. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood in the warm threshold of my own home and watched them fumble for their version of remorse. Jessica shifted. "It's just been really hard. We didn't realize how much you did, how much you carried." I nodded once. Let the silence wrap tightly around them. Patricia's voice softened. "We weren't fair, but families get lost sometimes. We're ready to make things right." I looked at their faces, familiar and foreign, softened by desperation, polished with guilt only because the cost of my absence had finally landed in their lap. "You think this was about a bed," I said quietly. "It never was." Jessica blinked. "Then what?" "This house," I said, "isn't about beds or couches or who sleeps where. It's about respect." They stood frozen, the night air creeping behind them. Patricia stepped forward. "Please, just let us talk." I stared at them for one long moment. And then, without raising my voice or breaking my heart, I gently shut the door. The final click echoed like thunder. Behind it, silence. Then a muffled voice, Jessica's, cracked through the wood. "I have nowhere to go." I paused in the hallway, felt the ache in her voice, but I didn't open the door again. Because I'd had nowhere to go for years, and they never noticed until their comfort vanished. So I walked away, not because I didn't care, but because I finally did, about myself, about peace. About never having to beg for space in my own home again. It's funny how quiet peace actually is. Not dramatic, not euphoric, just steady. In the evenings now, I read by the fireplace, blanket over my knees, a mug of herbal tea warming both hands. The Wi-Fi hums gently in the background, the thermostat keeps a perfect 72 degrees, and the walls no longer echo with someone else's chaos. The house finally breathes with me, the way it used to, before I forgot what ownership really meant. Not the title on a deed, but the right to peace without apology. Every bill has my name on it now. No more split payments, no more late notices buried under takeout menus. I pay what I use what I need, and nothing more. Lisa comes over on Sundays. She always brings something absurdly sweet, a strawberry croissant or once a slice of cake shaped like a llama, and we sit by the kitchen window with mismatched mugs and bottomless stories. On one of those mornings, between laughter and bites of flaky pastry, she raised her glass of juice and said, "To homes built on boundaries, not burdens." I laughed, but it caught something in my chest, something tender, because that was it. That's what I'd built. Quietly, brick by invisible brick. A home where I didn't have to earn my right to be here, where no one measured my worth by how much comfort I could provide, where dignity wasn't something I traded for harmony. One evening, I lit candles throughout the house and walked slowly from room to room. The office was still my favorite, a small sanctuary of my making, shelves lined with books I chose, colors I loved, a plush chair that hugged my back like it knew me. The bedroom, my bedroom, had been repainted. Soft gray blue, new linens, a door that shut quietly and stayed shut unless I opened it, a simple nightstand, a framed print that read, "You belong in your own life." Even the couch in the hallway was gone. I donated it to a shelter in town. When the delivery guys picked it up, one of them asked, "Sure you don't want to keep it? It's in decent shape." I smiled and said, "It's not about the couch, it's about what it meant." He nodded, not needing further explanation. Sometimes I still see Patricia in town, at the pharmacy or in the grocery store. She doesn't look at me. Once I caught her eye and nodded politely. She blinked and turned away. Jessica, I hear, moved out of state. A cousin's spare room or something. They never apologized, and that's okay. Because I didn't take my life back to earn their apology, I took it back to stop needing one. I reclaimed my home, yes. But more than that, I reclaimed my place in it. Not because I shouted. Not because I burned bridges. But because I stopped asking for permission to exist. Now, when I walk through my front door at the end of the day, I don't brace myself. I breathe. And in that breath, I feel it freedom. The quiet kind. The lasting kind. The kind you build yourself. A year passes quickly when you're no longer measuring time by how loud the silence is. 12 months ago, I was folding laundry on a hallway couch, rationing dignity like oxygen. Now I walk barefoot through my home with the heat set exactly where I want it, and no one complains that it's too expensive. Because no one else lives here. No one else takes up space they don't respect. No one else erases me. The walls are still the same eggshell color. The hardwood creaks in familiar places. But the energy inside, completely different. This house is no longer just shelter. It's testimony. Every Thursday, I drive 30 minutes to a shelter downtown. Not because I owe anyone. Not because I'm trying to be some savior. But because I remember what it felt like to be unheard, overlooked, slowly turned into a utility instead of a person. I sit in a circle with women whose eyes hold stories even deeper than mine. Some whisper, some shout, some just sit, arms crossed, waiting to see who they can trust, and I tell them the truth. I gave them everything, and they gave me the floor. It always lands the same. Silence first, then a shift. Shoulders ease, eyes meet mine, recognition flickers. I paid the bills, I kept the water hot, I made the house run, but they only saw me as long as I was useful. The second I stopped serving, I stopped existing. And then I tell them the part that matters most. I stopped asking, I stopped apologizing, I stopped shrinking. Because it was never just about the bed. It was about who was allowed to rest, who was allowed to claim space, who was allowed to matter. And for too long, I believed it wasn't me. Now I sit in my reading nook every night like it's a sacred ritual, a place untouched by resentment. The same lavender candle burns low on the table. The bookshelves hold not just stories, but parts of me I've stitched back together. I haven't redecorated the office. I haven't moved the chair. It feels right to leave it that way, as a reminder that once I had to fight for a door that locked, and now I don't even think about locking it. Because there's no one left inside to barge in. Lisa still visits, always with snacks and strong opinions. One night over Thai food and streaming crime shows, she clinked her wine glass against mine and said, "You didn't just take your house back, Em, you took your voice back." She's right. I use it now. Not to scream. Not to explain myself to people committed to misunderstanding me, but to remind other women, maybe someone watching this right now, that you don't need permission to matter. You just need proof. And sometimes that proof is in the form of a locked door, a paused payment, a single no. And sometimes it's in the mirror, staring back at you when you finally stop dimming your light just so no one else feels uncomfortable. So tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. And more importantly, what's one boundary you're ready to set, even if it's small, even if it scares you? Because here's the truth I learned too late. Peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from honoring yourself in the face of it. Let's stop calling silence strength. Let's stop mistaking endurance for love. Let's start calling it what it really is, sacrifice. And let's choose something else now. Not revenge, not cruelty, but release. The kind that rebuilds your life one choice at a time. This was my story, but it might be yours too.